And this is a thing that there's a lot of videos out now, and I don't know if these people get these videos, but I get them. I get these videos of horrible war encounters.
Yes.
In Russia and Ukraine. It's horrendous. And it brings me to this thing that I think about a lot, because I think about things that other people do for a living and their jobs, and I think about, like, they live in a world that I don't understand. You know, there's like I'm fascinated by professional chess players. They live in a world that I don't understand because I don't play chess. I love the fact I kind of know how the pieces move, but I've really only played like maybe 10 times my whole life.
Yeah.
There's a thing that people have. It's a quality of being a human being. You only know what you know. And other things become like these sort of like ethereal narratives. They're not necessarily real. And war is one of them.
Yes.
War is one of them. There's a thing that people, the way my friends who've served talk about war is so titanically different than the way people who ideologically support or disavow it. Like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about if you say there's no need for a military. You're crazy. We are going to get subjugated. Someone will come here with men with guns. If you take away all the guns that everybody has and no more military, we're fucked. And if you don't think that, it's because if you'd never gone to the dark parts of the world, or you've never gone on Telegram. I'll send you some videos. I saw a guy get killed with a hammer yesterday.
Jesus.
This is so important for people to understand, which is that we are 75 years removed from what war on the European continent actually looks like. And, you know, Joe, I'm the same way. I've been on fucking Live Leak, you know, since I was like 12, which is probably bad for you. But, you know,
for you.
Terrible for you. My girlfriend's like, what are you watching? I'm like, what? And she's like, a beheading or something like that.
My wife will come into my office and I have to pause videos. And I'm like, you really want to see this? You really
they always say
yes,
but then they can't handle it.
I can't handle it. I can't handle it.
Yeah,
I don't do well with blood.
The point, though, is that, you know, we have to try and convey this to people and just say, like, hey, when you're on Twitter and you're like, hey, you know, fuck you, you know, anybody who's against the narrative, you're like, this is not a joke. Like, hundreds of thousands of Russians are dead. Hundreds of thousands are Ukrainians are dead. Millions are displaced. We have no idea what the end game is like. And, you know, just what Krystal was saying, I have this thing where, you know, the Fight Club line, like on a long enough timeline. I mean, like on a long enough timeline, Ukraine is getting everything that it wanted. So originally it was like no-fly zone. And Biden was like, I'm being responsible. I'm saying no. Well, first they ruled out Patriot missile systems. Patriot missile systems are now on the way to Ukraine. They ruled out tanks. Now tanks are on the way to Ukraine. Right now, there's an article talking about how F-16s, they're thinking about sending Pentagon F-16s. Biden says no now.
Right, exactly.
We'll see.
But he was saying no to tanks.
Right.
Like 5 days before they sent tanks.
And here's the thing.
He doesn't remember that, though.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, you're right.
Right.
And
Like,
you gotta dig deep too. Like, for example, originally we're like, we just want Ukraine to take back what it originally lost. And listen, if I was Ukrainian, I'd be pushing for the same thing.
Absolutely.
I have 100% sympathy. They are not in the wrong here. They've been invaded by a foreign and aggressive power. That said, like, we got to think about what's best for us. Right now, there's a New York Times article about U.S. warms to helping Ukraine take back Crimea. I'm like, well, hold on a fucking second. I'm not saying it's just that Russia took Crimea in 2013, but they formally annexed it. And if you ask people in Russia, Crimea is Russia. So if Ukraine uses a Pentagon-provided F-16 to bomb Crimea, now what? Like, now, that's a violation of Russian nuclear doctrine. They've updated their nuclear doctrine, by the way, to not even say it's defensive. They can say they can use it in any capacity that Vladimir Putin wants to. That was a significant change.
Yes.
If you look in the history of the way that the great superpowers actually consider their own nuclear first strike use. It's something that is considered ironclad, and then, boom, it changes like that. You're not even going to hear about this.
And I was heartened a while back when there were some leaks that came out of the Biden administration that he, at like a donor event in San Francisco or something, said basically like, we got to make sure we avoid World War III. I'm paraphrasing, but that was he was like, we got to avoid nuclear war. We got to avoid World War III. And I was like, okay, good. He's thinking about that. That caution that existed at that point seems to be totally out of the window. And if you read, the official sort of like state paper, the New York Times, about the administration's thinking, they're like, well, Russia said this nuclear stuff and it didn't happen. So they must just be bluffing. It must just not be real.
Jesus.
And it's like, okay, number one.
Was there a timeline before they could press the button?
Exactly.
And,
they didn't blow up the whole world yet. So we should be fine.
We're fine.
I mean, that's insane, number one. And number two, The idea that Russia hasn't escalated in response to our actions is just not true. They've been striking critical energy infrastructure, including, in and around Kyiv, which was an escalation. They went through with conscription that was very politically dicey for Putin. There's rumors that they may go through with another draft. So the idea that they just took all of this lying down and didn't escalate is a fantasy to start with. But it's incredibly dangerous and foolish to think just because they didn't push the nuclear button yet that, it's all fine and he's just full of it.
Thank God there's people like you guys out there, because there's so many people that they have Ukraine in the same category of importance and significance as they do climate change. Climate change, which is a real thing, but it's a politically divisive alleyway where you're not allowed to veer from the course and even look at any kind of science. It's the same thing with Ukraine. A support for Ukraine is undeniable. You must put it in your Twitter bio. And you guys are saying, you're not saying don't support Ukraine, but you're saying, look where this is going. Do you understand what this is? Because you can't just openly support something you don't understand without a comprehensive view of what the fuck the factors are and how it got to be that way in the first place. And you're not going to hear that in a 5-minute clip on mainstream news.
Yes.
You're just not going to.
It's so important for us to internalize that message. We're not saying we hate Ukraine. We're not saying we don't even support Ukraine. The Ukrainian cause is just. What we're saying is, what about our interests?
All the
there
factors.
are interests that supersede Ukraine. If I was Ukrainian, I would do exactly what they were doing. But guess what? Ukraine does not exist without the United States. We provide the vast majority of the military there for the diplomacy perspective. If we cut off military weapons to them tomorrow, that's it. Done. They literally are forced to the negotiating table. I'm not even saying we should do that. I'm saying, what is the end game? And, in my neighborhood, there's more Ukraine flags than there are American flags. It's like Ukraine flag, gay pride flag, no American flag. But then it's like, okay, if you go to those people, and if I would just say what they said, they would say, this is disgusting. This is Russian propaganda. It's up to the Ukrainians for when they want to stop. And I said, yeah, I completely agree. But it's also up to us for whatever we stop providing them weapons. We're like, hey, if you want to defend this part of your territory, that's totally fine. That's our end game. My end game is not having a nuclear conflict, is making sure that we have peace on the European continent. Vladimir Putin is in opposition to that peace. But Putin and Russia are going to exist. Something I think people should take home too is, you had Peter Zeihan on. He said it really well, which is the first year of every Russian conflict is a total shit show. If you look at Finland, if you look at the first year of Hitler's invasion, even going all the way back to Napoleon and some of the Tsar's campaigns before that, they lose a shit ton of people. It looks like a complete mess. They fire a bunch of generals, all of this. And then what do? They use their vast the Russian Colossus is known of that for a reason, because they have a shitload of people. They have a lot of military materiel. They amass it and they throw it at them.